Hello and happy Wednesday, September 16th. Welcome back to another exciting edition of Rate Desk. I'm your host, Michael Thomas, here to talk about multifamily interest rates and other news. First, jump into the markets. Big news today. Fed just released the minutes from their recent meeting. This is the last Fed meeting before the election. And, drum roll please, Fed is unchanged on the Fed rate. So 0 to 0.25. Staying where they are at. That was to be expected. Haven't seen a major reaction yet. That was, again, to be expected. Fed did mention that they are going to look at this 2% inflation for some time. So no rush there to raise rates. In fact, some are projecting, we really probably will be in this Fed 0 to 0.25 market for a while, maybe even into 2023. So jumping over to the other markets, we have seen the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average up in the last 4 trading sessions. NASDAQ down a little bit. Some of the big tech stocks sold off, so that's impacting NASDAQ currently. We are seeing the U.S. 10-year Treasury yield come back down from where we were last week in terms of yield. So we're at 0.67, that's 67 basis points today. And we are seeing the crude oil back up in the $40 barrel range, which is, of course, good to see. Big news on the economic front. Again, we are in this low interest rate world for a while, for the foreseeable future, potentially. Of course, subject to change on economic conditions. And of course, we know those can change very quickly and the markets react very quickly to them as well. Jumping over to the FHA rates, we are seeing them tighten a little bit from last week. The 223F is at the 215, that is 2.15, fixed for 35 years. And the 221D4 sub-rehab, new construction, 2.75. Folks, that's fixed for 40 years. That is a very low interest rate. Going over to the agency desk, we're seeing a little bit more aggressive quoting on Fannie Mae, coming down to the 270, 265 range on their 10-year money. And Freddie Mac could be as low as that. I'd say the range there is coming out about 290 on the low end to maybe about 310. So again, still very low pricing on both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, fixed for 10 years. Jumping over to other news, I was on a call yesterday with HUD leadership from the multifamily division there of HUD. They had the head underwriter on the call, leading the call, and then we heard from every regional center of HUD, and everyone is up in volumes. So HUD is having an unprecedented year of production in terms of loan applications submitted, approved, endorsed, and closing, of course. So by the end of the year, HUD is anticipating their fiscal year end, they're going to be up to about 20 to 21 billion in production, way above where you would see them in a typical year of production. That's around a 69% increase that they're tracking so far. Thought that was pretty impressive. Clearly, some of that are folks that are already in the HUD portfolio refinancing to these very low interest rates that we have currently, but quite a lot of activity on what we call heavy Fs. So existing 223F refinance transactions where a borrower is doing a lot of repairs, but not enough for it to become a sub-rehab. We're seeing a lot of business in that arena. Also, really a lot of new construction loans as well, particularly out of the Southwest and in Texas, seeing a lot of new construction in the pipeline there for FHA. A couple best practices that really came out on the call, very important to submitting applications into HUD. A couple things you want to be aware of. One, environmental issues regarding if you have a phase 1 report, it identifies some problems that may lead to a phase 2. HUD wants to see that phase 2 completed, the results of that summarized, and if there is an action plan, the action plan, which would be inclusive of costs and scope of work, they want to see all of that in the application. Okay, in the past, you could submit it and kind of work on that during the process of the loan. Now that is, due to their volumes, they really just have to have everything ready to go once it's in the door. So if all of that stuff is not identified and taken care of on the environmental piece at application, you're going to be in the preliminary reject desk, which is where you don't want to be with HUD because that adds extensively to your timeline. and clearly you don't want to add to that timeline already. So have all the environmental issues sussed out, dealt with, concluded, and summarized prior to submission with HUD. The other item that came up on the call was there had been this leeway to some extent regarding these physical capital needs inspections or capital needs inspections where you need to identify all the physical attributes of the property, put them in a report. Due to COVID, getting into 20% or 25% of the units was not really possible. So there was some leeway around, it just needed to be done prior to the loan approval, if you will, the firm commitment is what that's called in HUD land. Well, now forget about that. They want the physical inspection to have been completed prior to the loan being submitted. We know this, but some folks in the pipeline may not have already done that. Highly suggested that you do that now. Again, if it gets sent in and the physical inspection hasn't been completed, prelim reject pile, again, where you don't want to be in HUD land. So make sure you have that physical inspection completed prior to submission, conclude all those environmental issues. Those are the two main timeline drags that the HUD offices are seeing across the country. Sounds like from what I've heard, their timelines are pretty much holding to their service level agreements. So they are seeing, applications get processed, submitted within a reasonable time frame. They are working faster. They were load leveling among all the different regional offices. That is no longer the case because every regional office has their own volume issues to deal with. They have used some contract underwriting depending on the regional office for small parts of it, but there's still a HUD underwriter that is assigned, has about 4 or 5 deals that they're working through. And again, the more you can have all those I's dotted and T's crossed up front, the faster you can move into that queue. And again, they still are issuing these timelines, the closing dates, the firm commitments. I mean, the volume speaks volumes, right? They are getting to the 20 billion in this fiscal year end. So great time for HUD in terms of interest rates. However, make sure early in the process, you are really buttoning up the environmental and the inspections so that you can move right through that queue and move towards closing. The cleaner the loan application, the faster they just want to get it out the door because that's where they're at in terms of volume today. That is good news. We still are in a low interest rate environment. I recommend that you continue to look at your portfolios and see how can you leverage them, how can you improve them. Maybe you pull some money out. Now's the time to rehab it. Again, interest rates are low and they could be low for the foreseeable future, but we're never guaranteed of that. So that is my tip of the week. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another exciting edition of Rate Desk. I am your host, Michael Thomas, signing off.